All right, everybody, what's going on? And welcome to another edition of SWAC Talk, the show we cover the show we cover the SWAC inside and out. This is our final SWAC tournament show. The next time we come to you, probably tomorrow, we'll be talking about the NCAA tournament and who Grambling is going to face. Whether they're in the first four or they're going to automatically be in the field of 64. We'll talk about all of that tomorrow. We'll talk about their opponent, and we'll talk about any other postseason opportunities that are coming the SWAC's way. I think I saw Bethune-Cookman might get an invite to the CBI, so that's something to keep tabs on. And we'll talk about all of that and anything else that comes up with the postseason. Um, Other than that, we'll probably do a few shows here and there um, around, after the tournament or whatever about basketball. Got a few more articles dropping, got a SWAC tournament recap article dropping on bustingbrackets.com sometime early this week. So y'all keep it there. And we're also going to have a lot of things still coming at you, even though the season will be over. So basketball not going to stop because the season's over. We're going to try to keep doing a little basketball here and there before we get back into football. So thank y'all for rocking with me through this whole tournament, man. This is like I feel like Reggie Theus today, man. Last night went late into the night, quick turnaround in the morning, and tired. So I want to go ahead and drop this for y'all and get me some rest till NCAA tournament starts. I did enjoy this tournament. I thought it was a pretty good one. So let's go ahead and get into it. Hit those socials: Facebook Swag Talk, Instagram Swag Talk, Twitter Swag Talk 76. Also, don't forget to like the video, comment, and share it, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. So with all that out of the way, man, let's go ahead and start off talking about the tournament as a whole. I did a few pros and cons. I'm gonna kind of talk a little bit about them. I'm not gonna go too deep into everything, but we're gonna start off with the positive, the pros. One of the biggest things I saw that really made me happy was that this was a fairly clean tournament in terms of the actual basketball itself. Um, not a lot of turnovers in any game. I mean, I think the most turnovers by any team in one game was like 14. So there weren't a whole lot of turnovers. We had a couple of teams that only turned the ball over 9 or 7 times. So that's a pretty solid margin. Looks like the average number of turnovers was like 11. So really clean games in that aspect. Not a lot of boring games either. There were a couple games that got out of hand, but typically they still were entertaining. I did not. I watched basically every game that was played on the men's side of the tournament, and I did not get bored by any game. You know what I mean? Starting at the first game with Alabama A&M beating Alcorn, that was a game that looked like it was gonna go one way, but it went the other way. And it never got boring. Bama State had a 13-0 run in the first half against Grambling to take the lead, but Grambling withstood it. And the fact that that was a 6-point game at the end meant you never could just turn it off. TSU and JSU, the game was kind of back and forth for a while before TSU pulled away. JSU still, because of the guys they have on their team, still was a threat to come back. So you always, you didn't want to turn away and miss it. And Southern and Bethune-Cookman was a 2-point halftime game before Bethune-Cookman heated up in the second half, and Southern just never got started offensively. So that still was a game that was a 6 or 7-point game by the halfway point of the second half. Again, not a game that you want to turn away from, even though I wanted to a bunch of times because that's my team and they was playing bad. But looking at the semis, the Grambling Bethune-Cookman game probably was the closest thing to a game that I felt like I might not watch after a certain point, but I watched it all the way through because you just the way this tournament has been going, you just didn't want to turn off a game, even though it was a double-digit game. You don't want to turn it off because Bethune-Cookman had guys that if they could have hit shots, they probably could have made it a better game, but it ultimately never happened. And then Texas Southern Alabama A&M in the nightcap. TSU looked like they were going to blow the game open early, and Bama A&M continued to fight and claw, which they did all tournament. And they made this into a ball game, and it was tight all the way through. And then even with the championship game, with Grambling leading by double figures through the bulk of the game, TSU went on a late run to cut it to single digits, and thought about turning it off. I was doing a stream last night. Honestly, like the 8-minute mark, I started to stop the stream because I didn't think TSU could get it going, but they cut it. They cut into the lead enough, and it got a little interesting at the end. So a lot of exciting basketball in the tournament. Like I said, clean games, not a lot of turnovers. So I like both of those aspects. Some great performances by players. Jonathan Cece. If you don't know him, you do after this tournament. He put on a couple of good performances. Tremichael Moden had a huge game in there, and just Jordan Smith in the championship game had a great game. Just guys kind of stepping up, making plays. Lorenzo Downey from Alabama A&M, another guy that some people may not know, had a big hand in both of their games. So being able to see these guys put on great performances, even some of the guys who didn't get the recognition during the season, seeing guys step up, seeing coaches make adjustments, seeing coaches put their guys in the right positions to win, and seeing teams fight and scratch and claw to not get eliminated. I think you saw a lot of that there. And I also like that they had, the games had a little bit of an edge to them, because that your season could be over after this game. There was a little bit of chippiness in some of the games, once teams really started to feel that crush of, are they gonna, are we gone if we lose? Are we gonna lose and be gone? So teams didn't necessarily bow out. I don't really think anybody really necessarily quit. I think if anybody got pulled away from it, was more the play of the winning team, less than anybody that quit. I thought everybody fought to the end, even games that were double-digit games. I thought the losing team still fought. I don't think anybody necessarily quit. And sometimes you see that in a tournament, especially a team who's having a rough season. They kind of want to just get it over with. But I didn't really see that. And I thought everybody, you're gonna, a tournament tests your endurance. It tests your depth as a team, and it tests everything that you're made of. And I thought there were a couple of situations where teams looked tired, but they still fought through it and tried to make the best out of the situation. But I like the little edge to it. It never fully got out of hand. There were a couple flagrant fouls and things like that we'll talk about in a minute, but nothing that ever really got out of hand, and it stayed on the competitive level. And chippiness in sports is fine with me. I love a little edge, and I love when teams know their back is against the wall and they have to go at it and get it. So that's definitely a good pro for me. And more basketball. I mean, over 200 regular season conference games, and you get 7 more basketball games. If you're a basketball fan, who doesn't want more basketball? And like I said, I know a lot of, I know ESPN Plus is not the best avenue for the games to be broadcast, but if you got a subscription, it is great to be able to come home at 2:00 on a Thursday and put the game on, watch that game. Watch some of the women's game. Watch the women's game in the evening, and then the men's game to close it out. Being able to watch 2 entire tournaments, is great, because that was a point in time where you could not watch anything but the championship game. So being able to watch and follow along with these games, and being able to recap these games with accurate stats and knowledge of the games directly after them is a plus for somebody like me that provides basketball content. It made it easier to write my recap article, because everything I needed was there. I was able to watch pretty much every game all the way through. So it's just great. More basketball. I'm never gonna turn it down, even if it's a bad team playing another bad team. I'm never not gonna turn down any more basketball. That's how some people are with football. That's the way I am with basketball. I'm just never gonna turn down more basketball. It's just you only get a few months of it, so why look down your nose at it at the end? And then that was history made. The championship game had an opportunity for both teams to make history. TSU could have won their 4th straight tournament. Grambling was playing for a chance to make their first ever NCAA tournament. and the G-Men came out on top, so they're going to the NCAA tournament for the first time ever. So that's history. Bethune-Cookman wins their first game in the SWAC tournament. So that's history. They joined the SWAC in 2021, so they won their first game in the tournament. So that's a historical moment, something to look back on and to remember. Just a lot of great things that came into this. But as there's good, there's also bad. I'm gonna start with with what I consider to be the least bad thing, and that's the scheduling. That was, I don't even want to call it controversy, but there was some talk that because Bethune-Cookman played the night game in the quarterfinals and turned around and played the first game in the semis, that they had an unfair advantage. And at some point somebody's gonna be put in a position where they're playing at off times. They're not playing every game at the same time that they do. So, when you're not the number one seed, I feel like you don't get an advantage. You don't. You're 4 seed, you're 5 seed, you're playing the 1 seed, you don't get an advantage in that round. You have, like I said, tournaments are a test of your endurance and your stamina and your depth. So if you want to get by this number one team, then sometimes you may have to play this team after you played a tough game the night before. But this was known before the tournament started. It wasn't like they reseeded anything like that toward the end of the game. After that first round, they reseeded, and this game fell out at this time and this game fell at that time. It was already known that if you win, you're gonna have to turn around and play at 2:00 on Friday. So I don't really put a lot of stock into that. I mean, yes, it probably hurt. It probably hurt, especially with guys being banged up. It's hard to go hard in one game and then turn around the next game and play. But that's what a tournament is, and I feel like the number one team, if they're not going to get a bye in the first round, then they need to have some kind of advantages for them to make being number one worthwhile. Because on a neutral court, in a neutral court tournament, there is no home court advantage. So you need to protect your 1 seed some kind of way. If they have to play in the first round, then they should get a day off after that, and they should have the opportunity to rest more. But at the same time, you're playing on short rest, but you're also playing a team who hadn't played in a couple of days. So maybe if they had a easy game in the first round, maybe they come out lackluster because they haven't really played much. So it works both ways. You can lose as a 1 seed in that situation if things happen. So I don't really put a lot of stock into that, but that was something that a lot of people viewed. And if people viewing it that way as a negative, I can kind of see it that way, but I don't really agree. The next con is something that's talked about all the time, and it's an issue that goes all the way back to the regular season, and that's attendance. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the attendance at the tournament. Was it solid? People didn't turn out, and that's something that you kind of take as it comes. But attendance in the tournament is not great. People said that they didn't really promote the games in Birmingham, and it's tough for people who come from from Alcorn or whatever on a Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon. That makes it tough for teams to turn out to games. Fans to turn out to games, but fans aren't really coming to SWAC games as a whole. It's not like there's like all these teams drawing great people to games all year round. Like, just looking at the numbers from this tournament, the first game, Alabama A&M Alcorn drew 784 people, and I'm sure that the bulk of that was people from Alabama A&M, since they're not that far away. I don't think any game really drew extremely well, but when you look at the conference attendance during the season, most teams averaged under 2,000 people. So I don't really think you can expect a great crowd of people to turn out for a tournament that when people don't really turn out for the regular season. You know, I mean, yes, you're gonna get people who come through to see their team, you know, play for a championship, but you're not gonna get that much. The championship game drew 2,100 people, and that's about around, you know, what the midpoint average of the season is. So, you know, I don't know what the solution is other than people need to start turning out the SWAC basketball as a whole. I think if you get people to turn out to SWAC basketball more and more in regular season, people would be more inclined to come to games. The Friday night game drew 2,045 people that had an Alabama team in it. So, you know, that helps a lot. You know, you know, you want to have, you know, that fan base, the local fan base, be able to be there, but you need a game to engage them. 528 was for the afternoon semifinal. So if you look, like I said, you're looking at these numbers. 2,100 looks like it's gonna be the top attendance, and that's just, you know, that's just gonna look bad when you're playing in an arena that's a big size. So maybe, you know, maybe even if you keep it in Birmingham, maybe you find I don't know, you know, the size of any arena in the city, but maybe you find a smaller one, or you play somewhere else that has an arena that's not as big. But you know, you're just looking at games where you had under 1,000 people in pretty much every game. I believe all the first round games drew under 1,000 people. I'm kind of going game by game, but that's, you know, having two out of your 7 games draw over 2,000 people. I think that's not that great. Or 3, because the first round game between Bama State and Grambling drew 2,176, so that was the highest attended game in the tournament, and that had an Alabama team in it. The semifinal with Alabama A&M and TSU drew over 2,000. That's another Alabama team in it. And then the championship game, you kind of expect on a Saturday night to draw well. So three out of your 7 games drew over 2,000 people. The rest of them drew under 1,000. So that's such a big extreme. I don't really know how you fix that, you know, other than, like I said, moving the games is not a surefire, you know, fix for it. You know, attendance in Houston wasn't great unless TSU or Prairie View was playing, because a lot of our fans don't turn out to our regular season games. So it's tough for you to expect people to spend money and travel somewhere for a tournament. So maybe that's just the way that this conference tournament has to be. It's just gonna have to be great games played in front of empty seats, I guess, unless people start to turn out. But that's my second con. My third con is probably the biggest that I have. Although the last one is big for a lot of other people, but the third con I have about the tournament was the shooting. The shooting was not great. There were a few games where teams shot really, really well. You know, you saw Alabama A&M shoot great in the second half of their game against Alcorn. Bethune-Cookman had a great shooting second half against Southern. TSU had a great shooting first half against Jackson State. Grambling had a great shooting first half against TSU. So you had a few halves where teams shot extremely well. You didn't really have a lot of games where teams shot extremely well. You had a lot of bad shooting performances, especially by the losing team. And yes, that makes sense that if you lose, you're not typically going to shoot well. But I went back and looked at the numbers. When you take the tournament as a whole, teams made 293 shots during this tournament from the field out of 741 attempts. That's a percentage of 39.5. If you break that down to a per game average, teams made an average of 20.9 field goals per game, and they took about 49.2. They took 52.9 field goals per game, which is a percentage of 39.5 per game. Teams that won, they went 159 of 357 from the field for 44%. If you do that per game, 22 makes 51 attempts, 43.1%. In losses, this is where the numbers really kind of drop. Team shot 35% from the field in losses, 135 of 384, 19.2 field goals made in losses per game, 54.8 attempts per game in the losses, 35%. And then the 3-point shooting was really, really, honestly, really, really bad. Now in wins, team shot the ball fairly decently, 37.9%, 47 of 124. And the winning teams made an average of 6.7 threes per game, and they took 17.7 threes per game. That's 37.8%. Overall, these teams shot 30% from the 3-point line, 79 of 263, and 5.6 threes made per game, and 18.7 threes attempted per game for a percentage of 29.9%. And then losses team shot 32 of 139 for 23%. That's an average of 4.5 threes made per game, 19.8 attempted per game, 22.7%. Now, of course, when you're losing, you're going to shoot more threes because you're trying to catch up. But, the disparity is just crazy. Bama State shot 27 threes in that game against Grambling. Excuse me, that was only a 6-point loss. So most teams, like I said, shot about 18 to 19 threes per game, made up almost 6 a game. Average point total per game was 64.7. 906 total points scored in the tournament between everybody. In wins, team scored 489 points. That's an average of 69.8. In losses, team scored 417 points, average of 59.5 points per game. And the scoring margin was a difference of 72 points. And then an average scoring margin of 10.3. So most games ended in that 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-point range. There weren't any 20-plus point wins, and there were no under 5-point wins. So every game pretty much was like between 6 and 13 or 14 points. And that kind of goes to the testament of the competitive of the game and the competitiveness of the conference. But the shooting was just not great, even though there weren't very many turnovers. Most teams, like I said, most teams scored fairly decently. Everybody played pretty much around their season averages for the most part. But the shooting from deep was definitely just not great. Just watching guys shoot 3 after 3 when the shot is not really there, or you could get a better shot if you make an extra pass, or even if you take a few steps in and take a mid-range shot. You probably could get yourself a nice little floater in the lane or from the wing. Just kind of get you a nice little shot there, or even get to the basket and get to the free throw line. I think you saw a lot of teams settle for threes, and just that really kind of hurt the performance of the game, even though most games were pretty clean. And then the final con that I have is the officials. I mean, SWAC refs are SWAC refs. I did a video about SWAC refs. Everybody's complaining about them. And for the most part, I don't think they were that bad. I think they allowed a lot. I think there weren't as many whistles in these games. I think they allowed a lot of physical play, some more than I expected. Some games honestly looked like football out there. Guys were being knocked down. You driving through the lane, 3 guys, slapping you. You're getting taken down, and you didn't get a call. And then maybe it's a touch foul somewhere else, but it was kind of inconsistent. And the replays, so many replays. I get that you need, that's an avenue for you to make sure you're making the right call. But so many things were replayed that sometimes didn't necessarily need to be. Some of it is just the way the procedure is. So I'm not necessarily blaming the referees for that, but that slows up games. That really takes the game and grinds the momentum down sometimes. It wasn't as bad as a regular season game, but it still is obvious when you go to games and you see this. You know that at some point the reviews are going to start coming, and they did. So that kind of marred the games a little bit. And like I said, I don't mind physical play. I'm not a guy that really likes to see guys constantly going to the free throw line because you're driving to the basket and they breathe on you and they call a foul. I don't mind a little contact in the lane. because I don't think you should be able to just waltz in there. But I don't think you should be knocked down every time you drive to the lane and not get rewarded for at least going down in there. And you started, and I think that might have been a reason why you saw more teams shoot from outside, because they knew that they really wasn't going to get to the line if they drove to the paint. So it kind of changed the way the games are played a little bit, but it didn't really hurt the games. I don't think there were a ton of horrible calls. Obviously, no game came down to a bad call. So that it wasn't that bad, but it's always tough to say the referee did a great job in the SWAC, because they typically they do the best they can, but it wasn't as bad as the regular season, but it still wasn't great. Looking at the leading scorer in the tournament was Jonathan Cece. He scored 63 total points, average of 21 points per game. Tremichael Moden had the tournament high with 26 points. Jordan Smith and Jonathan Aku from Grambling both had 16 total rebounds in the tournament for a 5.3 rebound per game average. Jacoby Hetty from Bethune-Cookman had the high with 9 rebounds against Grambling. So those are some single game and per game leaders. The all tournament team, Lorenzo Downing from Alabama A&M, he had a great tournament. Helped keep them in games with nice shots from outside. It just was a really solid player. Derek Carter Hollinger from Bethune-Cookman, off the bench, he was a steady guy, especially against Southern. He was a big-time difference maker in that game, and he kind of was one of the few guys from Bethune-Cookman that came to play on Friday. Jonathan Cece, like I said, he was the tournament's leading scorer. Multiple, he had 2 20-plus point games in the tournament. He really stepped up and helped TSU get to the championship. And then Grambling's backcourt of Dozier and Moden, they round out the all tournament team. And both of these guys had huge games. Dozier had a big game against Bama State. Moden had a 26-point game against Bethune-Cookman. And then Dozier had a solid scoring game against Texas Southern. Moden dished 7 assists in the championship game. He had 8 points, but he really did a lot of other things, which is what you want from your point guard. So, they both are a load in the backcourt, and they earned all tournament honors. Moden was the tournament MVP as well, so big honors for him there. And that's pretty much, the tournament in a nutshell. Like I said, I kind of wanted to do it a little differently, just kind of share my thoughts on it and go from there. So we'll be back on Monday when we talk about whoever the opponents are for the SWAC in the postseason, who Grambling plays in the NCAA tournament. Are we going to get anybody in the CBI, or any other tournament that's out there? So with that being said, man, I'm your tour guide around the SWAC, C. Wells, signing out, and I will catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.